It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday Night Live Hall of Fame. I am your guest host for this roundtable, Matt Ardill, and it is my pleasure to be hosting an amazing panel of former guests who are going to share their votes for this season's set of candidates going to the Saturday Night Live Hall of Fame. So what we'll do is we'll go around and we'll have everybody introduce themselves. Brad, if you want to start.
Hi, I'm Brad Robinson from the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. Happy to be here.
Dave?
I'm Dave Buckman. I own Cold Town Theater in Austin, Texas. I'm a Second City alum, Boom Chicago alum, and general podcast panelist for Saturday Night Live related podcasts.
Thanks, Dave. And Will?
Yes, hi, I'm Will Norman, and I'm just also an SNL enthusiast and podcast, guest here on the Hall of Fame Network. I've been was on the Beyonce episode, and just excited to talk with all of you today about this season's nominees. Thanks for having me.
Great. And what are we all expecting tonight? Like, what kind of result? What kind of conversation? I know I'm expecting a fun time. I think it's going to be an interesting combination of opinions here, but what are you all expecting for tonight?
I'm expecting to have my mind changed on a couple people. I have more than 15 on my ballot, so I need to be talked off the ledge for a couple of these folks.
I'm interested to see where the conversation goes, old versus new. My ballot's fairly full, and it's fairly full with returning nominees and older nominees. So I'm excited to see if I can convince some people to keep these old-timers on the ballot.
I'm expecting an all-out bloodbath tonight. I guess I might be. Maybe that won't be the case. Maybe not be the case, but I'm on the opposite of Dave, where I used about 13 of my votes because I'm still kind of on the. I guess I'm kind of on that border with a few of them, and actually just want to have a conversation to see who I might be overlooking and who some of those votes might go to. With returning nominees and first ballot people, I'm excited to see where the conversation goes today.
So we'll use 13. What made you land at that number? Like, why did you hold back a couple?
So I ended up leaving my ballot at 13 because there's a lot of other candidates that were first ballot or returning nominees that I feel like I needed a little bit more time, and was actually hoping to get some conversation with the panelists here today to just kind of see where I may have overlooked someone, besides just kind of speaking to my own biases, to see if I could be educated on some people that I might have overlooked that deserve to be in those final two spots.
Awesome. Dave, how many votes did you use, and what was your logic?
I used all 17. Even though we're only allowed to have 15, so...
So there's going to be some editing on the fly kind of thing going on?
Yeah, I'm going to need Will and Brett to kind of like tell me why somebody doesn't deserve to be on there, because, I could have picked 25 out of these 30. It was very, very hard to get to where I am now. And I'm looking at it, the people I have on my bubble are just legendary. So how do you cut them from that ballot? I don't even know how to rank them if I was going to. So that's where I'm at.
And Brad?
I'm a bit more like Will. I've got 14 selections. 11 of them are pretty solid. I've got actually 12 because one of them is the musical guest, my one musical guest vote. So I've got a couple that I'm on the fence to hear about, and I left an empty spot to see if someone can convince me.
I, like you, Brad, chose 14. I have one where I'm like, this last time I did this, I filled all 15. And then afterwards I was like, that was a really strong case, but I cast my vote and I'm going to have to stand by it. So I left one to let somebody convince me at the end of how I'm going to vote. So it makes it for an interesting conversation, create some stakes when we're doing that. Terrific. Okay, well, what we'll do again, I'll just start working my way around the ring here, and why don't we just start naming off our picks? So, Brad, do you want to start us off?
My number one pick is John Belushi. Easy pick if you've heard our podcast. I'm a huge John Belushi fan, Saturday Night Live and otherwise, and he's hands down my number one pick between iconic characters, great impressions, legendary sketches, does it all, plays himself. And, in addition to Dan, the first cast members to ever be featured on the show in another role while they were cast members, when him and Dan were musical guests as well. They were the first cast members to actually be showcased in another light as well. So John Belushi's my number one.
I watched a lot of those very early episodes at an entirely inappropriate age. So, I got to know his work really young, and he made me laugh then, and he still makes me laugh now. I mean, I think I rewatched just recently the Star Trek sketch, and it's just the impersonation that he does of Shatner is hilarious. And it's just it shows a range that a lot of people, especially now, as there's been distance from his work, people don't credit him with. Like, they think Animal House and this loud, ruckus character, but he had a lot more to him. And I can totally understand that.
Yeah, he has a lot more to him, especially in season 1. He does his Shatner impression. He's got his Marlon Brando impression. The Joe Cocker impression that he does in episode 3, I still will put up against anything that's been done in the last 50 years on that show. And even stuff you forget, like we've been going back, we've been watching the old Land Shark sketches, and he does a Richard Dreyfuss impression, which is amazingly great. It's surprisingly good. I didn't even remember it. It's so good. So it's even the small stuff. And then before he gets big, that season 1 is great watching John, because he plays very childish and like impish sort of set scenes where, like, by season 3, that's all gone, because he's full blown Belushi by that point. So he definitely has a range. And if you've watched from the beginning through, you see that whole arc.
Anybody else have any thoughts on Belushi?
Belushi was near the top of my list as well. I mean, I think it's impossible to tell the story of SNL without mentioning Belushi and his contributions. So obviously taken away too soon.
I did not put Belushi on my ballot. Maybe in future ballots, perhaps, when he's stacked up against 4th or 5th rounders. But Belushi never hit me. Well, I love Little Chocolate Donuts. I love the Blues Brothers. I love the Marlon Brando impression. I love the Joe Cocker impression. But I don't think that he was much of a team player. I think he was very much about Belushi and Belushi's goals for the show. And a lot of his humor hit me as very angry and aggressive rather than funny. It's not my kind of humor. I feel the same way about Michael O'Donoghue. It's not, it was funny, I think, to me when I was 12 or 13. But I think I've grown out of that style of humor. And I also love Animal House, and I love all of his movies too. But when stacked up against some of these other folks, I think their contributions to the genre of Saturday Night Live, there's better contributions out there.
I'll try to argue him in this a little bit.
Okay.
I hear what you're saying with his comedy coming from anger, and I do agree it definitely gets there. But if you look at the early seasons, 1 and 2 especially, I don't think he's gotten there yet. The Joe Cocker, the Marlon Brando impression's amazing. The Star Trek scene, both with Elliot Gould, are great. His Beethoven impression, the Richard Dreyfuss that I mentioned, Little Chocolate Donuts. There's so much stuff he does, the samurai character, that lead up to him getting to that point. I think once he becomes what we've come to know as John Belushi, I agree with you a bit that it does get a bit edgy. Edgy is the wrong word. It does get a bit angry. It does come from that place, and it's not as genuinely funny. But to Will's point, I don't know how you talk about Saturday Night Live without John Belushi, without seeing him in the bee outfit, without seeing him in the samurai, without seeing him behind the counter of Olympia restaurant, not being Jake Blues, him and Aykroyd together, Final Days sketch. There's just so much of those first 4 years that if you don't have John Belushi, I don't know what happens. Season 1's all about Chevy. Chevy leaves, and Bill Murray didn't jump right out of the gate as blowing the doors off the place, and John really helped keep that together until Bill found his voice. I mean, not just John alone, John and Dan and all of them, but John Belushi is a key factor as to how we made it from the Chevy Chase era till the Bill Murray era, and that show exploding into the zeitgeist of comedy.
It's a strong argument. It's a interesting case. This is the fun of the round table. We get to hear the different points and counterpoints. So Dave, do you want to share your first pick?
My first pick is Bill Murray. Bill Murray is, for me, the consummate sketch performer. He basically owned season 4 and 5. He's come back to host so many times and kind of just lift the crowd and the cast and the show with him every time he comes back. His contributions beyond his 4 years in the show. He set a tone for the kind of cast member. He's the first new hire, for all intents and purposes, the first featured performer. And just the kind of person that's in every sketch, setting that archetype of like that Phil Hartman, that Bill Murray, Will Ferrell, somebody who's just going to consistently get in there every single sketch and destroy, and even make bad scenes better just by being in them. And his characters are just so many to mention, from the nerd sketch to Nick the Lounge Singer to his time on the Weekend Update desk doing Oscar picks. There's just so many iconic things that you can point back to Bill Murray. Should absolutely be in the Hall of Fame.
Anybody else vote for Bill Murray?
He's my number 2. I can't argue with anything Dave said. He's my number 2 pick. Again, I mentioned it before, like he had a rough coming in after Chevy. Chevy left and he didn't jump right into the spotlight. So it took him time and he took the reins and he ran with it. And, he didn't really have that many impressions, but didn't need to. Like Dave said, his sketches are great. His characters are great. He held down Weekend Update. There's a lot of anger behind Bill Murray. I'm just going to say he's got that drive in him a little bit as well, just to relay my John Belushi point. But no, Bill Murray. But no, I mean,
but he's
again,
impish. He's got like,
he plays it off much better. He does. But no, I had him right there at number 2 with Dave. Same thing. You can't talk SNL without Bill Murray.
Will, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think I'm probably going to hop into Dave's camp here and say that Bill Murray's not on my Hall of Fame ballot. So, yeah, I'll explain. I still have 2 spots left, so it's not definitive. But the reason why is, so I will start by saying that Groundhog Day is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love Bill Murray. But I was worried that I was shading a lot of my feelings about Bill Murray, his post SNL career versus just on the show. Obviously, most respect to Nick the Lounge Singer, his work on Update. I also know at one point in time he had obviously innovative for the time, his plea to the viewers and kind of saying, hey, I'm new on the show. I don't know if it's actually really working. Like, can you guys write in and, give me some support? And I think kind of even in that, even though it's obviously very innovative, just the fact that he was kind of in that spot, thinking about him as a Hall of Famer, someone who's just, to me, are they a Hall of Famer or not? I think he was obviously great on the show at the time, but just wondering if I was shading him a little bit too much with my fandom of him post-show. But I think you guys have made some very compelling arguments. Like I said, that early nod went to John Belushi, but like I said, there's still some wiggle room. So maybe I've overlooked Bill, but just to make it on my first cut in the first view. So,
and I'll admit he's not on my list either. Now, I mean, I know, but I mean, I love Ghostbusters. I love Groundhog Day. I love his work in the show. I love his work after the show. But it was one of those things where I'm like, am I letting this these things that I loved as a kid outside of the show shade my opinion there? But also I'm like, I was trying to balance it out where I'm like not choosing all of these big names and choosing different people. And it's like, but I have one. So he's definitely, Dave and Brad made good points when I cut to the end. I don't know. He's in there. He's in there as my maybe. Now, Will, who's your first pick?
So my first pick at the top of my list was Dana Carvey. So for me, Dana Carvey, master impressionist, obviously had some iconic characters. He did obviously a great Bush impression. I think most people who impersonate George W. Bush are doing an impersonation of Dana Carvey doing Bush. You got Church Lady. Obviously have Garth from Wayne's World. Garth Algar. So he has an iconic character on the show as well that went on to do other things. And I just think when you think about some of the all-timers, we look at the cast members that we love for the Hall of Fame. They are people who can do it all, that can carry a sketch, that can do impressions, that can do characters, original characters, that get along with the cast, that have things that outlast their time on the show. And I think, you're looking at the Hall of Fame, it's easy to kind of, we just talked about shading things with like someone's post-career versus what they did on the show, but we're isolating just to someone's time on SNL. I don't think that there's a time in the future of SNL's existence that someone couldn't mention Wayne's World and wouldn't be, notable as an SNL sketch. Isn't that special? Bush impressions. Like, I'm no Dana Carvey, so I'm not going to do those impressions. But I think it's very hard to say he's not probably one of the best cast members that's ever come through. And during his time on the show, and I think he just made it a great impression, and so he was near the top of my list.
Anybody else vote for Dana?
Dana's at the bottom of my bubble. He's somebody that I'm like, I want to put on that list because how he's like the perfect cast member. It's just somebody who's always going to have fun and be likable and come in with characters every week in, week out. I think a lot of his material doesn't hold up so much. Some of the writings just feels weaker compared to modern day sketch comedy writing. But you can't deny his level of talent, and just like he was just built for that show. But I don't know if quality of going back and watching his stuff holds up against some of the other folks on this list.
Brad, you have any thoughts?
I've got him at number 3 on my ballot. He is probably, pound for pound, I think one of the best performers the show's ever had. As Will said, impressions, I don't know if there's one he can't do. Bush, Johnny Carson, Carsenio, characters, Church Chat, Hans and Franz, Wayne and Garth. So, I mean, right there, his resume is amazing. He's one of the first guys who would take a cold open and sit by himself in front of the camera for 7 minutes and open the show by himself. And I like to look at it, you look at each era of Saturday Night Live and where they stood in that era. So you got to remember, Dana Carvey showed up Lauren's second year when he came back after his return, and the show was not in a good place. And that cast is really the reason that SNL exists today, is guys like Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, Dennis Miller, John Lovitz, Jan Hooks, Nora Dunn. That cast pulled it through, and Dana Carvey right off the gate with like Choppin' Broccoli and Church Chat in the first 4 or 5 episodes of that season is just vital for not only that season, but the next 4, 5, 6 years that he was on that show, keeping Saturday Night Live relevant, funny, hip, and continuing.
He's on my list as well, just for that. I mean, to be fair, that's also like my high school era SNL. So, I mean, I feel like that always kind of burns itself into your emotional psyche. So like him and Mike Myers and all of that crew from that era are just really emotionally important to me. But also like just like even his little stupid stuff, like the Choppin' Broccoli sketch. It's just such a silly little premise, but he pulls it off in a way that it never becomes stupid. It never becomes like, okay, we get it. He says, I'm chopping broccoli over and over again. Let's move on. It just remains fresh. He knows how to keep the tightness, the tension just right. And I found he brought that to like everything. So he is on my list as well. Awesome choice. I am just going to go by alphabetical order because I can't wait these people. It's so too difficult. That's a level of emotional investment I'm not ready to give. But I am going to start with Amy Poehler. She is on my list. She is just such a, like Dana Carvey, like a workhorse. She would show up for a sketch. She would give it her all. It's that Massachusetts upbringing kind of thing, like where she just fights and goes. And I mean, you can see it in like her entire career with like UCB and all of these other projects that she's lifted from the ground up. When she attacked a sketch, she really put all of her energy into it. And I mean, like, yeah, these great characters like Betty Caruso, where it's just like, she has a way of grounding even her silly characters where, Bronx Beat is just such a silly concept, but it never veers into the realm of like Coffee Talk with Mike Myers when he did Coffee Talk, where it's just like, okay, this is just a little bit too silly, especially now that Barbara Streisand has showed up. It just remains true to the premise. And so that was my first vote. Anybody else?
I agree. Amy's on my ballot as well. I think there's some power. She is just a dynamo, a force to be reckoned with. Caitlin's one of my all-time favorite characters, and her stint on Weekend Update is exemplary. Paired with Seth and with Tina, she had a rough couple first episodes, but then just dominated Weekend Update for many years. I love her characters. I love her energy. I love her, just her general energy and attitude towards comedy and lifting other people up through positivity. And Bronx Beat, again, also one of my all-time favorites. So Amy Poehler, for sure, belongs to be in the Hall of Fame.
I would agree. She was, like I said, probably, I guess, number 2 or so on my list. Like I said, also just an all-time cast member in that like lineage of Kristen Wiig and just kind of that dynamo like that's there throughout the time on the show. And like I said, she has some great characters. Or Hillary Clinton is like the original. Like I said, she's just very dependable. There's just those cast members that show up in a sketch, it's going to be good and they're going to give it their all. And I just feel like she was one of them, and just is to me, like a no questions asked first ballot Hall of Famer.
I do not have her on my ballot. I do not think she's a first time ballot Hall of Famer, but you guys talk a lot on the podcast with recency bias. I'm probably whatever the opposite of that is. So I don't think I have anybody on my ballot as a first time nominee that is post 1990 something. I think she'll get in eventually, but there's a lot of other people I think are more deserving to get in whose time's running out almost. So I didn't vote for Amy Poehler because I think she'll get in eventually, but I don't think she's first timer for me.
Why don't we switch directions? Will, do you want to share your next choice there?
Yeah, sure. So I would say next is another first ballot Hall of Famer, but I think has a pretty long tenure. Be Mr. Christopher Walken. Was one of my top of my list. I think that when you look at all the all-time hosts on the show, I think Walken's definitely up there. Obviously, he's hosted a lot over his time in his tenure. He has had some notable characters and some great sketches. Just the Continental, I think it was obviously a great sketch. His Colonel Angus sketch still makes me laugh. And then Trivial Psychic, I think just a hilarious premise that he just executes to perfection. So it's just, I feel like Walken is one of those guys who came on, and obviously he was very easy along with the cast, and we talk about being a team player. When I'm thinking about hosts, people that have been on the show that are in that world, it's, how are you able to be within the cast, not just kind of on the outskirts, letting them do their thing, but really ingratiate yourself to the cast, have your own memorable sketches, and have almost recurring sketches that make me think, if it weren't for your life outside of SNL, you could have easily been a cast member. And it's kind of tough to give a host a nod over the cast members that are there grinding it out every week. But he just feels like someone who, once again, is up to nominate. I think he's just been a great host, and I thought that he deserves to get into the Hall of Fame.
Anybody else vote for Christopher Walken?
He's on my bubble. I haven't cut him yet. Certainly participating in Cowbell and the Centaur sketch and the Census sketch and Continental and all those just wonderful, just being game for anything. And just I was listening to a couple of his scenes before the show tonight, and just his two-handers, which is him and somebody else going back and forth, is just beauty. his rhythm is perfect, his deadpan is perfect. He is game for anything, and it's and of all the people that just reads cue cards, does anybody do it better than Christopher Walken? No, I don't think so. I think he's one of the all-time best hosts, and I wish they'd bring him back just one more time. But he'll probably be on my ballot. I don't see why he wouldn't be, because I don't think he would be bumped by anybody else on this list. So, sure, he's on my ballot. I'm going to call it right now.
Awesome. Brad, any thoughts?
I do not have him on my ballot. He is a great host. He's a fantastic host. I only have one host cemented on my ballot, 2 on my bubble. But again, he's one of those people where I feel like maybe not first time ballot, but I can see him definitely in the future.
He was on my list. I think the thing that put him over the top, I mean, it was the Christmas Carol where he's reading it to the kids. It was just like, it was so dark and so weird, and nobody else could pull that off except for Christopher Walken. It was just like perfect. I have to feel it's like he's almost like a trained vaudeville man, like song and dance man. Came up like during my trivia, I talked about how he was hired to dance with Liza Minnelli by her mom at a birthday party. Like, it's just like he's such a weird human being on so many levels. And it's just, it's like it forged him into this perfect, you don't get many of those hosts, but those ones that are just make the perfect fit. And that's sort of where I feel he fits in. Well, next up, Dave, who's next on your list?
The next person on my list is Jan Hooks. Jan Hooks, to me, is my just top performer. I think she's my number 2 favorite cast member of all time. She has such a grace to her, but also a little bit of smarm to her. Maybe one of the best actresses to ever be on the show. Actors to ever be on the show. Her commitment to the moment is unparalleled. She can play heartbreaking. She can play goofy. She can play straight. She is maybe one of the best utility players they've ever had. Of somebody who can do characters, do normal people, and just take whatever you've written for her to another level of humanity, which is brings a 3-dimensional shape to a sketch that a lot of people can't deliver. So I would watch Jan Hooks do anything. Rest in peace. And she's by far on my ballot.
Yes.
Any other votes? Yes.
Oh, slam dunk. She's one of my other slam dunk picks for this class. She everything Dave said and more. Like I mentioned about Dana Carvey, she was in that cast that kept it going, and she is as vital as he was, if not more. Yeah, everything Dave said. Yeah. Jan Hooks is amazing.
I totally agree too, because like I said, that was my high school cast, and she was on my list as well. I mean, like the fact that she played Tammy Faye Baker and Jessica Hahn, like she did both impersonations. I'm just like, that's mind bending, and speaks to the power of makeup. But yeah, like such an amazing performer. Any thoughts, Will? So for Jan Hooks, she's actually on my bubble. So I think there was another earlier cast member that I went with instead. But like I said, I have all respect for the work that she's done on the show. And I think generally speaking, there's a lot of, I'm kind of on the opposite side of Brad, where if there's people that have kind of gone through and have been on the ballot, I kind of, in my mind, I'm always like, is my gut instinct, is this person a Hall of Famer or not? I'm kind of less out of the baseball film of like kind of go and get multiple at-bats to get in. It's kind of like, do I think you're in right away? I definitely think she's on my bubble for this first one, like left those spaces open, but a couple other people that I had above her, but there's still definitely room for her. I know she was a huge contributor to the show, and definitely deserves all the respect in the world. Brad, your next pick.
I'll do Jane Curtin. I've got Jane on my ballot. Again, original cast. Show wouldn't be what it would be without her, and I think she is the most underrated cast member in the history of the show. My show, we're currently halfway through season 1, and we have a bit that has just kind of come up organically, which is how great is Jane? Because every episode at some point we talk about how great Jane Curtin is, whether she's playing somebody's wife or mother or the star of the sketch. She just does everything. She didn't have a lot of characters. They came about a little bit later in her run, but she had some impressions. She was the quintessential talk show host. Anytime they needed a talk show host for those first 5 years, Jane Curtin would do it, and she would do it well. And she would go toe-to-toe against any host, against Belushi, against any kind of knucklehead they would throw against her in any of those talk shows. Or, she handled Weekend Update. She was the first person to do an editorial on the desk when Chevy was hosting Weekend Update. And then she was the first person to take over for him by herself. And then her and Dan and her and Bill. And if you just go back and watch, I know they use baseball analogies on this. Her batting average is very high. It's very rare Jane Curtin strikes out or has an out. She brings it every time.
You got any other Jane Curtin votes?
She made it on my ballot as well. I think, we're talking about like Jan and Jane, obviously both great, but that's kind of one of the original, for all the reasons that Brad mentioned, like her being able to hold down that fort and be that constant through the early stages of the show. I thought that she was great and that she got on my ballot. So she definitely made it on mine as well.
Yours too, Dave?
Yeah, she's my number 3. Jane before John, for sure. Yeah, she is. My favorite cast member of all time is Parnell, and Jane Curtin invented that role in the cast. She is the backbone of that cast. She makes the sketches have grounded reality. She's the person we identify with in those scenes as an audience member. She was finally allowed to flourish in that season 5, and some of the characters she came out with were fantastic. And a wonderful, underrated actress. I wish she did not have this feud with Lorne or the show, because I would love to see her and Lorraine host once before the 50th. It would be a great show. But when I was growing up, of course, my favorite was Aykroyd when I was a kid watching those old shows. But when I started doing comedy for a living, it was Jane. I always go back to Jane. Jane was doing most of the work in those sketches, and I really appreciate her as a comedian. We don't really call it straight man anymore in the woke world of comedy. I'm trying to push forth absurdo and reasoneer instead of straight man and and crazy guy. But she is the reasoneer to be for the ages, for sure.
Well, I think this was our first unanimous vote, and she was on my list as well, just for all of those reasons. And like Dave said, but the backbone. I mean, during those chaotic first few seasons, she was almost like outside of the context of on the screen. She would really help keep that cast together and grounded just as a cast. But then on the screen, she kept those scenes just flowing, and she's just criminally underrated by a lot of people, I feel. So yeah, if anybody gets a unanimous vote, that is her. It makes me very happy. Well, my next pick this is my musical guest, Dave Grohl. Just like his love of the show is so undeniable. Like, he's game to do stuff every time he's there, and he's willing to come back and be a part of the show, even to not star, just to as backup for Tom Petty, and just put himself out there as a recurring supporting musical act. And he's been on an incredible number of times. So just crazy number of times for a musical act, which I think it technically puts him in the Platinum Club, which is because he's been on, I think, that many times. I gotta wonder what they get when they get into the Platinum Club. If they get the fancy blazer when you make it into the 5 timers, what happens there? And I feel sorry for whatever Martin Short is made to do for them, because he seems to be their go-to minion at the 5 timers club. So yeah, so anybody else have any thoughts on Dave?
Dave's on my bubble. I'm considering I think he's on the bubble for a couple of reasons. Number one is, yes, he's been there more than any other musical guest, which is something to be applauded and noted. But I can't think of performances of his that are iconic outside of a Nirvana performance. I don't. Them Crooked Vultures, was that one of them? And Foo Fighters. Sure. And they're always great. And I love the Foo Fighters. I love when they come on. I love their songs. But I can't think of one that was just when I go back and think about that performance, some of the great musical performances on that show, none of his really come up for me. So that's why he's on the bubble for me. So definitely longevity, definitely, fan of comedy, gets the show, always brings it. But as far as actual content, nothing stands out to me as iconic.
So we'll keep going the same direction, and we'll switch around next round. So Will, what do you have next?
All right. So I think I'll go with some more. I'll be on the recency bias side of things today. I think that's a role I'll play today. So I'm gonna go with someone that's actually coming up again. I think it's been controversial conversations, but I'm gonna say Justin Timberlake. I know he's kind of been on the ballot before and kind of steadily climbing, but I'll kind of reiterate what I said before. I just think, to me, he's one of the best hosts that they've had. I think when you look at it, for the time that he was on the show, I know he hasn't been there in a while, but similar to early hosts in the early days, like a Steve Martin, like appointment television for people to say, I'm going to watch SNL this evening because Justin Timberlake's going to be on or doing double duty. I thought that he really brought that level of excitement to the show. Obviously, felt like he could have been a cast member on the show. He did recurring sketches. He's talking about Omeleteville and all the iterations that came thereafter. Obviously, a talented musical artist as well, doing double duty, as I mentioned before. And I mean, Dick in a Box will be around for the rest of time. And I think that, when you talk about whether you are in, utility or in everything and you're just doing a great job consistently, or you're there and you just have some iconic moments, I think he has a little bit of both. And definitely the tensions on him because he's the host. So a lot of stuff is written around him. But I think people that were on the show at that time, people that he worked with and collaborated with, would say that he felt like someone who could have been on the cast. And I just feel like he's someone who, to me, is a Hall of Famer. And so that's why I would nominate or, have Justin Timberlake on my ballot.
Anybody else got Justin on there?
Yes, I do. Justin is definitely, he's the only host I have on my ballot. He is a consummate professional. As a host, to not only be a musical guest as well, which I think you would have to be in order to be an iconic Hall of Fame host. Not have to be, but it certainly helps. And his performances, I can think of many of his musical performances as well. But to have recurring characters as a host, not with one generation, but with two generations. He, the singers with Andy Samberg, the Andy Gibb Show with Jimmy Fallon. He has his own recurring character, as you mentioned, Omeleteville. That is his own. It's him. He's the constant in that. That is insane. Christopher Walken, of course, is in there as well with the Continental. That makes sense as well. But I would look forward to any Justin Timberlake show. I'd watch any Justin Timberlake repeat. If it comes up on the early version at NBC, I'm sticking around and watching the Justin Timberlake show because I know it's going to be a great show. And he represents to me 5-star host experience. So I'm all for Justin Timberlake.
I don't disagree with what you guys said, but he's not on my ballot. But it's just there. I can find, I think, 13, 14 more people that I'd rather make sure got in or stayed on the ballots before him. I'm sure enough people will vote for Justin Timberlake that if he doesn't get in, we'll make it through the next round, and I will happily vote him in probably next class. But as you see the second half of my list, there's a lot of prevent defense, and I'm voting for a lot of people because I don't want them to go away.
I mean, I love his work. And like Dave said, 2 generations, he was able to forge relationships with and have multiple, not just Dick in a Box, but we got like Mother Lover and a 3-way. So it's a trilogy of very weird and uncomfortable songs.
And the dating game.
Yeah. And also the Barry Gibb talk show. I mean, like, that's one of my wife is a huge Bee Gees fan. So she gets excited when that comes on because she says, this is so fun. He was on my bubble. So I still have one left. I don't know. Maybe it'll be Justin. We'll see. So Dave, your next choice.
I'm going to go with Maya Rudolph. Maya Rudolph to me is a consummate professional. It's her 3rd ballot. So like Brad, I don't want her to go away too soon. So I want to make sure that I vote for Maya Rudolph because she is a phenomenal cast member and a phenomenal host when she comes back. She has so many talents. She plays broad. She plays specific. She does accents. She does celebrity impressions. She has a rhythm that is all her own. She does impressions. She is everything that you would want in a cast member. If I'm a director or producer, I want a Maya Rudolph in my all-time cast, because I can throw anything at her and she is going to take it and make it better for sure. And she's going to bring the house down. The audience is going to love her. And I just think she's phenomenal talent. If I was going to build my top 7 cast members of, like, if I had a dream team, Maya would definitely be in that cast.
Anybody else vote for Maya?
I did as well. I agree with everything that Dave said. I think that she's an all-timer. I think she's incredibly talented and also like on the stacked cast. I think it was the time of the show when like the women were really dominating and like just obviously really like doing it really great. And I feel like she almost got overlooked at times, but it was amazing. Kind of reminds me of how like Cecily was like also on the stacked cast, but I think she just, because she never really had that goodbye when she started kind of building her family and kind of would pop back on the show every once in a while near the end of her tenure. I don't think she got the roses she deserved on her exit, but I just think, you know, once again, looking at all the generations of the show and some of the talent that's come through there, I just think that she is amazing and definitely made it to my ballot this time around.
Did not make it to my ballot, but she's on my bubble for the exact reasons Dave was saying. You know, I think she definitely needs to get in, and I'm trying to gauge when I finally do give that vote to get her in, because I don't want her to fall off. But she's on my bubble, and she's probably one of the leading candidates to sneak in my last spot or two. Yeah.
Same here. Like, she's just such an incredible talent. But again, it was that weighing of choices that makes it tricky. But again, like the Prince show, like her Beyonce on the Prince show is so hilarious. Just paired with the Prince impersonation, it's just they're so bonkers together, her and Fred, and it's a thing of beauty. But again, it's like there's so many hard choices. This is a real tough one. Okay, Brad, what do you have for us?
You know, I can go for a twofer if I may, because they're kind of
Sure.
intertwined, and I have a feeling they'll both get shot down. I have James Downey and Jack Handey, two longtime amazing writers who I think a lot of casual fans probably don't even know their names, or if they do, don't know them well enough. Second time ballot for Jack Handey, third for James Downey. I remember I emailed Jamie after season 1 when James Downey didn't make it in, and I emailed him like, how the hell did your voters not put James Downey in the Saturday Night Live Hall of Fame? He's such an amazing talent and contributor through multiple generations. So the two of these are writers, which, you know, I think you guys have talked about this before. Writers are a little bit underrepresented in the Hall. These are two votes that would be slam dunk. I would put them in for both of their writing work, for all of the work they've done, all their sketches, all their contributions, all the work they've done with the key cast members, you know, their names and faces of. So many of them have worked with Downey and Handey over the years.
I also had both of them on my ballot for the
Thank
same
you,
reasons.
Will. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think Jack Handey with Deep Thoughts, you know, I think alone, like those are classics. And then with Downey, I think obviously he's been involved in a lot of sketches, but I also leaned into the fact that there are so many people that have passed through SNL that mention him and his influence and his notepad and constantly being one of the greatest joke writers of all time. And, you know, as you mentioned, Brad, like writers are kind of in the background. They don't get the recognition that they deserve for being the backbone of a lot of these sketches. And both those two just felt like they should get their due. And they definitely made it on my ballot this round.
Yeah, I had James Downey for sure, just because of his contributions and the longevity of his tenure there. You know, going from the original cast all the way through Norm Macdonald. You know, it's quite an impressive run, and being a influence in that writers' room for that many years. I don't know. For me, he's a slam dunk. Jack Handey was an unfortunate cut. I couldn't get Jack Handey on my ballot. I wanted to, and I listened. Actually, I listened to the Jack Handey episode. Went back today while I was grocery shopping today and listening to it. And he wrote a lot of things that I hadn't realized he wrote, which was good for me to hear. But it occurred to me while I was listening to it how singular his voice was, and how he doesn't really have a lasting influence on the future generations. So it feels to me like his contribution was very like this very specific style of humor that didn't really like resonate through the generations. Maybe Will Forte a little bit kind of picks up where Jack Handey left off. Maybe a little Kyle Mooney, just that kind of train of thought. But I don't think that Jack Handey had the staying power of his influence as some of the other folks on this list. And as much as I love Toonsis and who doesn't love Deep Thoughts, Deep Thoughts was already a thing before he got to Saturday Night Live, so that wasn't his Saturday Night Live contribution. That's the thing. He got him hired to Saturday Night Live, and he started contributing that to Saturday Night Live. So I wouldn't really count it as his contribution to Saturday Night Live as much as it is his signature piece.
They're both really influential writers. It's a strong case that Brad makes, so it should be interesting to see if they make it. My next selection is the one that I feel is going to get shot down. Very controversial one. Dick Ebersol.
Oh.
He was there from the beginning. He helped make the show a reality. When Lorne stepped away, he got a lot of flack, and people are like, oh, the Ebersol years. But really, he saved the show. Like, he made hiring choices, bringing on Eddie Murphy, he kept the show going. Only, like a lot of people blame, there's the terrible Robert Downey Jr. cast era. A lot of people peg that on him and don't realize, no, that was Lorne's first year back. That was his fault. The fact that you had the Brat Pack as half the cast is not on him. It's not on Dick. So yeah, I think, if we've got Lorne in there, I think we should have Dick alongside him as one of the founding producers and creators of that show.
Dick Ebersol is definitely on my ballot. He's my number 5 on my ballot, just above Justin Timberlake, for all the reasons that you said. And I started watching the show regularly during that era. That was when I came online with Saturday Night Live. And so, Gary Croker, Mary Gross shows were like what I started watching every week. And so when Lorne came back, I didn't understand who that guy was. That's not true. But I like those shows. I love that Christopher Guest, Harry Shearer, Martin Short year. I thought that was such a fun, and Dick Ebersol, of course, was in there from the beginning, but he reinvented the show in the 80s and kind of found a rhythm that we're still following to this day. Introducing a lot more taped pieces, promoting Eddie Murphy, bringing in that Julie Louis-Dreyfus and that whole crew from Chicago as a group from the Second City in the 80s. And so I love what he did to the show. I know he even tried to kill the show a couple times, which is fine. You can have some villains in the Hall of Fame for sure. Billy Martin's in the Hall of Fame, right? In the Baseball Hall of Fame. So for sure Dick Ebersol belongs to be in the Hall of Fame for what he contributed to the show before his tenure and during his tenure, for sure.
I have him on mine too. Yeah, definitely.
Same, for all the reasons you listed.
Awesome. Excellent. All right. Will, who do you have for us next?
I will go with The Lonely Island. Why not? I might be on an island with this one, but I'm going to go ahead and nominate them. The reason why I wanted to have them, like, I know they've been kind of on and climbing, and I think that one of the main reasons you talk about kind of the way SNL obviously started as being a live show, the fact that they came in and were able to bring the show into the 21st century and be able to have pre-records that were more accepted in the format of the show, and be able to, even though it's not live, be able to bring another way to, help the variety format of the show be relevant nowadays, especially when you look at how the show is consumed now. A lot of people aren't necessarily watching it live. They're watching it the next day, and they were kind of helping it be ahead to have those kind of made for streaming, made for the masses hits. They had a lot of obviously great sketches. They had a lot of great pre-records, like over 100. And like I said, we've talked about some of them. I'm on a boat, Dick in a Box, Laser Cats. There's been so many different iterations that they had that they're able to own as a writing team too. I know Andy was kind of the face of it, but being able to prominently feature writers and into those sketches and be able to bring the hosts into it, and that's something that even now there's pre-records that are more part of the show every single week that yes, there were some throughout time. They weren't the first people to do a pre-record, but like that being a staple of the show every single week and not being something that was kind of frowned upon and like we'll do it every once in a while. I feel like they deserve to have a spot in the Hall of Fame. And like I said, I guess kind of talking on both sides of my mouth, Brad, like they're getting close to that point where need to figure out if they're going to get in or out. And, there's a lot of stories to be told about the beginning of SNL, but I feel like when you look at how the show is now and bringing it into like a more modern era now, the way things are consumed, I think that they deserve to be in for their contributions. I
agree with you, Will. They're still not on my ballot. But I'm pretty confident they would make the Hall of Fame without me voting them in. Like, I'm sure they will get in. To your point about them wanting to get in, this is their third ballot. If they don't get in this time, I would vote for them for their fourth time, because it as much as I don't want them to get in right away, it would be a sin if it took them till their fifth and final ballot. So they're not on mine. I'm sure they'll get in, and if not, they'll be in next time, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think there's very few people who changed the game. Not only did Mulholland change the game, Eddie Murphy changed the game. John Lovitz changed the game. Kristen Wiig changed the game. But very few writers changed the game on Saturday Night Live. And then Lonely Island definitely did that. And you got to give them props. I think step 2, your dick in that box, might be one of the funniest things that's ever been written on Saturday Night Live. That's every Christmas. That makes my wife laugh out loud. Every Christmas without fail. And if you can make my wife laugh at a dick joke out loud, you've earned your spot in the Hall of Fame.
They're on my list as well. Yeah, for all of those reasons. I mean, the pre-tapes had become like either really, really weird, like Love is a Dream. Such a weird concept that from that like 90s era, or just like these kind of by the numbers commercial parodies. It was like, okay, what drug parody or, car parody or whatever, like this, but they brought it back like almost to the Albert Brooks level of just like leaning into the really silly, the comedic, and making these pre-tapes vital again, making them feel not like an afterthought, but an important part of the show. And also being possibly the best musical parody act aside from Weird Al Yankovic, who needs to be on the show. I will say this. I will go to my grave fighting for him to be on the show. How has he not been on the show? But yeah, like they're just an incredible bunch of writers, incredible talent. And totally agree.
I will say, not only do they change the game of Saturday Night Live, they changed the game of comedy while on Saturday Night Live, which is very hard to do. Most people, if they're going to change the face of comedy, they do it after Saturday Night Live. They did it while they were on Saturday Night Live, so that's very commendable.
Dave, who do you have for us?
I'm going to go with the last person that's on my definite ballot and not on my bubble, and that is Paul Simon as a musical guest. I think from the get-go, he was one of the people that really supported the show, brought credibility to the show, kept coming back to the show. He hosted, he's done sketches, but as far as a musical guest, he has had some iconic musical performances. He's got certainly Here Comes the Sun with George Harrison. He's got Still Crazy After All These Years in the Chicken Suit. And he's got The Boxer after 9/11. I think for those 3 musical performances alone, you'd have to consider him as, if you have to have one from each category, I don't know how you don't pick Paul Simon on your ballot. He is a friend of the show and it's just wonderfully fits into the vibe of what that show has been since the very beginning.
Any other votes for Paul?
I do not have him on my ballot, but I feel like Paul Simon is a very weird and interesting case, because I agree, like all 3 of those performances Dave mentioned are great, but he wasn't the musical guest for those. He was the host, or, the 2000, after 9/11, he was an unannounced guest. Paul Simon's first, couple appearances on the show was as a host. Now, granted, he sang a lot, but he was technically the host. And so putting him as a musical guest, I don't know. And I feel like there's a very weird, and this is kind of to the Dick Ebersol of it all, weird fourth realm that could exist in this Hall of Fame where you're not pigeonholed into a particular thing. And I think someone like Paul Simon really would take that, because
Yeah.
I don't think he does it on his hosting status and gigs alone. I don't think he does it on his musical guest status alone or his cameos alone. But when you put them all together, like one of the best skits he's been a part of is when he's in line with Jan Hooks, I think it is, at the movie theater.
Yes.
And he sees all the people walk by and he remembers them from like a concert and they bought an album. And then Art Garfunkel walks by and he has no idea who he is. You know, so but again, so it's, I think if there was a weird fourth hodgepodge category, hands down, I would give it to him. But as a musical guest, I left him off.
It feels like there needs to be like special achievement inductees, just for something. Because he's all these categories coming together, like you both said. So yeah, that's that. Jamie, something to consider.
like that old white guy that's in the background of like 1,000 sketches.
Yes.
With the white hair, you know that guy?
Yeah. All right, Brad, what do you have for us?
I'll go with now I'm kind of in I've gotten through my slam dunks in my bubble-ish realm. I have one host on my list and it's John Goodman. He multi-generations. I mean, what was it? 12, 13 years in a row he was hosting. I think there was one time he hosted with Tom Petty again, and the running joke in the monologue that they thought it was the same episode from 6 years ago. You know, as a host, would throw himself into the sketches, throw himself into the show, whatever was asked, whatever he needed to do. If he had to dress as Linda Tripp, you know, whether you like or dislike how he joined the world of the Blues Brothers, what have you, but it still says something to who he is and what he means to that show. And we talk about, as we've said before, you know, the era that you grew up watching SNL, that era for me was a lot of times when John Goodman would host. So he's a third-time nominee. Of all the hosts I have, I don't want to see John Goodman go and not get in, so I'm keeping him on my ballot as my host spot.
Anybody else vote for John?
Not on my ballot.
Yeah, he's on there too. Like I don't want him to fall off, but it's that bevy of talent. You know, it's hard to choose. All right, well, my next one is going back to the early years. Elliot Gould. So as for hosting, because he was just such a fixture during that like 76 to 80 era. He was the first movie star to host, like big name movie star to come on. So it created, you know, like Paul Simon helped create legitimacy. Elliot Gould helped create legitimacy for the show. And it's like Lily Tomlin was the same way, where they almost felt like members of the cast just because of the intimacy during those early years and the recurrence and the relationships they seemed to build with the cast. So yeah, so Elliot Gould is on my list of hosts to be inducted.
Not on my list.
No?
As much as I love his movie roles and him as an actor, didn't really stand out to me as a major host.
Not on my list as well. I agree with, I think everything you mentioned about Elliot Gould, take away the movie star aspect, and I think there's a better host candidate from that era that's on my bubble above him.
Yeah, I also didn't have him on there. Not to pile on you, Matt, but I also didn't have him on there. But I mean, definitely, like you said, great contributions to the early parts of the show. I just didn't I had him on my bubble, but I didn't have him on my final ballot.
Hey, after the surprising turnaround of the Dick Ebersol choice, I totally fair. I will take this. Okay, Will, who do you have for us?
So next one I have is someone that's actually returning, but next one I'll talk about a cast member is Molly Shannon. So for me, I think Molly is another one of those cast members that's an all timer. I think you talked about the energy that she brought, the versatility she had on the show. She was obviously with a stat cast as well. Has one of the most recognizable characters of all time with Mary Catherine Gallagher. I know spinoffs don't mean your movies outside of the show, how successful they are or not, don't count for anything, but obviously recognizable enough to get a shot at it. Sally O'Malley, something and Delicious Dish on NPR. I mean, those are some really classic moments and sketches and classic characters. And like I said, she's coming up on that third ballot. I think she's just one of those, a great cast member. And so she made it on my ballot this time around.
Got any other votes for her?
Much like Maya Rudolph, I think she'd get in. She's on my bubble, but I needed to be convinced to put her above a few people.
Well, I am with you. on this one.
Okay.
She is on my ballot. And you know what really put her over the top was her recent hosting gig. Honestly, because it's like watching her perform. It's like she's still so vital. Like I would love to have her on the cast now. Like it would just she's so full of energy, and like all of those characters that she brought back, like Sally O'Malley. You know, it's just like they still work. They work now better than ever, and that just speaks to the timelessness and like the heart that she brings to the show. So she's got my vote. Dave, who do you have for us?
Oh boy, I guess my next one, I'll go back to my season 1 episode, and that is Franken and Davis, who I spoke for in season 1. They were the first team to be hired, predating Lonely Island or Good Neighbor or any of these other writing teams hired, Practical Theater Company. But they actually, between them, they each have 20 seasons on the show, which is unreal. 19 of them were in the same season. They each had one season apart. But the contributions that they made on that show to political discourse, to political comedy, to satire, they were the first ones that Lauren just gave like 5 minutes to do whatever you want on the show this week. They had their own mini episode with Saturday Night Live called The Franken and Davis Show. Some of them are unwatchable, but that also shows a lot of trust, how much trust Lauren had in them and their sensibilities. Franken was such a fantastic senator, and but they also created so many iconic characters throughout the years. You know, the Coneheads from Tom Davis and the Continental from Tom Davis, and Stuart Smalley from Al Franken, and just so many things that people don't realize were them. And to also have that kind of influence over the writer's room over the course of the first 25 years of the show is unmistakable. So for that alone, especially on their third ballot, they should be in the Hall of Fame by now.
I've got these guys, they're on my bubble, and they're on the inside of my bubble. But what I try to figure out is separating Franken and Davis from Al Franken and Tom Davis. You know what I mean? Like, are you putting Franken and Davis in because Al Franken created Stuart Smalley? Like, because Franken and Davis was a unit for a brief period of time. Both of these guys contributed a lot years down the road. But what's the difference between Franken and Davis and two different writers combined together? So I look at it, and even doing that, I still look at it as Franken and Davis, the team of Franken and Davis, and I still have them on the bubble for all they've done in those early years and what they did. But that's why they're on my bubble. Is I'm kind of like you just mentioned with Molly Shannon. Like, I would not put her recent hosting job towards her getting into the Hall as a cast member. But that's just me.
Well, Brad, who do you have for us for this next round?
I mean, can I ask Dave though? Like, what do you think about that, Dave? Because I know I remember your episode, and it was great.
No, it's a really good.
And
notion.
What do you think about that? Of people? It's kind of like the Paul Simon thing again of Franken and Davis as writers beyond being the team of Franken and Davis.
Well, I would say it's a really good notion as far as Paul Simon goes. I'd say that if he's doing a musical number, he is a musical guest, whether he's the announced musical guest or not. He is a musical guest in that sense, and I don't. The fact that they were in the writer's room together, to me, constitutes a Franken and Davis influence on the show, whether they're getting a singular writing credit on a sketch or on a season, individual writing credits, or but they are in the room for 19 seasons together in that room. And that seniority that they must have had in the 80s is unparalleled as far as, connecting the original cast to the Phil Hartman era, all the way through Tina Fey, when Tina Fey brings Tom Davis back for a season. You can't discount what those two guys being in the room has meant to generations of writers and sketches. Sarah Silverman, all the way up to Sarah Silverman working with Al Franken, famously stabbing with a pencil. But to be able to have worked with John Belushi and Sarah Silverman on Saturday Night Live, it certainly tells me a lot about your influence on the show and whether you should be in the Hall of Fame or not.
That's a good point.
Regardless of writing credits.
Okay, Brad, how do you follow that up?
Followed up with Herb Sargent, original writer, co-creator of Weekend Update, head writer, seasons 4 and 5. Left when Lauren left, came back and did another, 10 years after that writing, up through the Norm Macdonald era. I mean, you can't not look at Saturday Night Live and not see his fingerprints all over it. And writing credits aside, when that band of 20 and 30-year-old knuckleheads showed up at NBC to try to do a TV show, Herb Sargent was like the elder statesman. You guys had a great episode on Herb Sargent. I thought it was one of the best you guys did, of how vital he just was in that machine of getting it up and running, of helping Lauren, of having somebody to Lauren to lean on to really form that show, what would work, what wouldn't work. I mean, as you guys mentioned in your show, the Writers Guild has an award named after him, for Christ's sake. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's just phenomenal. And I was so ecstatic to see that you guys even had him as a nominee that I'd totally put him in.
Anybody else have him on their list or have any thoughts on Herb?
Well, I had Herb actually on my bubble, but inside my bubble for the same reasons that Brad mentioned, because I think, to your point, he was so influential in the early parts of the show. And then obviously the mastermind behind Weekend Update. And how can you talk about SNL or the history of SNL without Weekend Update and what kind of a staple that was early on and what that's done for comedy and the way that it's been spun off into its own entities in different ways and, often imitated. And obviously he was really influential. So he's someone that I think I was also re-listening to some of that, his episode earlier today. And I think it's just being more educated on the amount of his influence is probably the thing that's been keeping him out. But I think he definitely deserves to be in, and he's probably going to get that nod just because of, like I said, those early contributions and how long he's on the show and just how influential of a writer he was.
Same here. I mean, like he's not on my list, but he's on my bubble as well. Where I'm just like, it comes back to like those people who helped forge the show, and he is one of those people who really shaped it into what it became. Well, that brings me to a third writer nomination, and I'm sure I'm going to get shut down again on this one. Michael O'Donoghue. Is he a jerk? Yes. I will get that out of the way now. He was a jerk. He was a huge jerk. He was a very mean man at times. But he also helped define the voice of the show in its earliest years and pushed it to places that I don't think it even goes to anymore. And, in those early days, there was some really cutting edge comedy. I mean, he hated the Muppets. That's one area where I will disagree with him on. But to be fair, they did not belong on that first season. I will agree with him there. I love the Muppets. They didn't fit Saturday Night Live, especially those weird alien Muppets. But he brought the Gonzo to the era. He made it like really like the comedy of those first few seasons was really leaning into the zeitgeist in a way that it stopped after a while. And I mean, I don't know if it's his lampoon aspect or just him, but yeah, I felt he's an important voice and an important writer and belongs in the Hall of Fame. Any takers?
I have him on mine.
Oh,
I've been wrestling with it today as I've been looking through it. He's at the bottom of my just above bubble. And I have him on for all the reasons you've said. And I keep arguing with myself of how many reasons am I keeping him on because of nostalgic sake. And like of what you said, not necessarily being worth. And the conversations we've actually had today actually are what really pushed me where I may pull him out more so than a Franken and Davis. Yeah, he had a huge part in the voice of the show, but in looking against, and the start of the show, but in looking against the rest of the nominees, does that hold up enough to put him above, say, 14, 15 other people? I don't know. Or even if I only put 13 votes in, is he one of those 13? I don't know. It's one of the ones I'm wrestling with.
I did not put Michael O'Donoghue on my ballot. I have a hard time seeing the humor in his comedy. It's, I guess I'm just going to leave it at that.
He is of his moment. He is very of his moment.
I don't think that his type of humor had a resonating effect on comedy as much as he would have hoped, or that he gets credit for. I think he gets. I don't see his brand of humor surviving past the 80s.
It's a valid point.
Yeah, totally true. Totally valid. Okay, well, we'll spin it around the other way. Brad, who else do you have for us?
I only have one left that hasn't been said that's in my list here, and it's another writer. I'm trying to get a lot of writers in. I only put in one host and one musical guest. Robert Smigel is my last nominee. Again, first ballot writer, longevity, the cast that he's worked with, the characters he came up with, the sketches that he wrote. Just I think he's an invaluable asset to Saturday Night Live. I have a feeling he probably won't get in the first couple ballots, but I want to get his name out there to give him a shot of staying on.
Yeah, he's on my bubble. I love him. I love him. I love his sense of humor. I love what he did with TV Funhouse. I love the sketches that he wrote. I love the energy he brought to the Dana Carvey era, to the Sandler era. I think some of his sketches are iconic, even if they're not even well known. They are iconic, like that Cluckin' Chicken ad. It's just it's so funny. It's so funny, and it's so Smigel, and it is Smigel. It's just some of the things that he has come up with on the show and from the show, and with people he met on the show. He's definitely at the very top of my bubble, and I would be surprised if he doesn't make it to my ballot.
Will, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, same boat. He's on my bubble for a lot of the reasons that have been mentioned in terms of just his contributions to the show and obviously TV Funhouse, and a lot of people mentioning his influence too as well that worked with him. But he was right there on the edge. Like I said, might still get in. I think he will get in eventually, but there were just a couple writers that I had ahead of him.
He is on my list. TV Funhouse, brilliant. And even Bill Swirsky's super fans.
Yes.
It's just such a bonkers premise, but it works, and because he had the perfect people for those roles, and he wrote to that. He's just I think a lot of his humor carries on into the modern SNL. Like, he definitely did resonate through the years in a way that I will admit my previous selection did not.
If you haven't seen it in a while, go back and watch the Trekkie sketch with William Shatner. It still holds up, and it is phenomenal today.
Yes.
And he's great in it. He's great in it.
Yes.
He's great. He's great in Superfans. He's great in You Like It a Juice. He's great, when he pops up in scenes. When he pops up in scenes, he feels like, yeah, that guy's a cast member, right? No, wait, no, he's not a cast member. Wait a minute, hold on. He would have been fit right in, and his sensibility is Saturday Night Live. I think his whole persona is what makes the show fun.
Well, Dave, who do you have for us?
I'm going to go back to my episode from season 2, and that is Paula Pell. Paula Pell is on my ballot. She had a very long tenure in the writer's room. She came up with so many iconic characters that are in her voice, and you don't even realize the amount of recurring characters that she brought to the table. In fact, when you go to the Saturday Night Live store and you're buying any trinket of memorabilia from Saturday Night Live, the odds are that you're buying a Paula Pell character, especially if you're a big fan of the 90s. She had a huge influence on the writer's room. She is still so funny. And I'm glad she's finally getting her due as a performer, which is what she was originally when she was working at Disney as a live performer pre-Saturday Night Live. That's where she cut her teeth, improvising with regular people. That's how she got to be funny, is because she could improvise with anybody. Any tourist that came through had improvised with Paula Pell as a character. So she has a singular voice that is, I feel like you know it when you hear it, but it's also so specific, yet the characters are generic, but the references are so specific. And that what makes her writing so on point and timely and of the day, is that when you hear a Paula Pell sketch, you can just feel Paula's vibe all over it. And I think that's what makes her such a strong candidate as a writer.
She was on mine. For all of the reasons you listed. I mean, Spartan cheerleaders, Debbie Downer, Gilly, such bonkers recurring characters, but they work. And yeah, she was on my list as well.
I did not have her on my list. She's on my bubble. Like I said, there were a few other writers that got in ahead of her, but definitely prolific in like her contributions to the show. She just didn't make it on my ballot this round.
Same with me. She's on my bubble, just below.
Will, who do you have for us?
So I think we've all kind of talked through one of the musical guest selections. I will talk about the musical guest that I went with, which was none other than Beyonce. So totally understand, there's a lot of people, as we've talked through this today, there's a lot of people with contributions to the show and, that have been on there for a long time. But, obviously going back to today's point, I was doing the Beyonce episode in season 3, getting a chance to re-look at all of her performances. She's obviously, if you're talking about the top 10 most famous people, especially from a musical guest standpoint that have been on the show, she's definitely there. I'm sure she's just a very hard get in general. So the fact that she's been on there with Destiny's Child, also been on there as a solo artist. Her performances are always great. She always does a great job of being able to bring a level of energy, choreography to her performances. She always has a beautiful voice. And I would say if we're talking about the reason why I think that pushed it over the edge is her 2008 appearance where she performed Single Ladies, which was obviously a huge hit at the time. Her performance of If I Were a Boy solo was amazing. If you wanted to see her vocal range, it was just an amazing performance. And then she also had some moments being in sketches. She was in a sketch with Destiny's Child with Destiny's Child early in the show, doing the I think it was Gemini's twin sketch parody with Maya and the rest of the cast. And then she's also in the Single Ladies spoof with Justin Timberlake and Andy Samberg, which was also a really popular sketch. So, I think, you like said, in terms of performers that have come through the show and the height of their fame, someone who is going to be appointment television for the show and obviously has many awards outside of it, but is someone that will make sure that the lines are wrapping around Studio H to get in. Beyonce is definitely one of the all-timers, and I quite frankly don't want to tell the Bayhive that she's not getting in, so she had to get it in there for my last the choices there from a musical guest standpoint. So I submit to you, Beyonce.
Any other votes for Beyonce?
I did not vote for Beyonce.
She's on my bubble as well, but I mean, it's one of those like cases of, people who've been through a couple of rounds already kind of thing. But I mean, she's definitely iconic, and her performance. I love the sketch that she did when the Single Ladies video shoot with Justin Timberlake. And it is hilarious. Like, and the willingness to take the piss out of yourself kind of thing, like not be too serious, just always elevate her. So I will be voting for her. It's just a matter of when.
Gotcha.
Well, I have no more selections left. So how are all of you looking? How many more do you guys have?
I'm out.
I have one more under consideration.
One more? Will, how many more do you have there?
I'm out.
All right. Well, Dave, let's wrap up our solid suggestions and votes with you.
Okay, so I've got a 4-person bubble right now. Only 2 of them are going to make it. I've got Smigel, Carvey, Dave Grohl in my bubble. And my 4th person in that bubble is Miley Cyrus. I think she is exactly what you would want in a musical guest. I think that every time she comes on the show, she brings a performance that is in line with the variety show spectacle that Saturday Night Live demands. And she keeps topping herself, which is really impressive. I mean, every time she comes, it is something special, a really cool cover. Her doing Wish You Were Here on the at-home shows was fantastic. Her doing So This Is Christmas with Sean Lennon at that Christmas episode. And I can think of at least 2 more performances of hers that were just like showstoppers. And I think every time that she's on the show, and her relationship with the show starts with Vanessa Bayer playing her on the show. So she starts as a recurring character, and eventually comes on and lets Vanessa take the piss out of her, but also delivers as a musical guest an A+ performance every single time she's on. And if you tell me Miley Cyrus is hosting, I guarantee that's going to be my favorite part of the show that week. And I'm not even a big Miley Cyrus songbook fan. I don't know many of her songs, but I do know that when she's on Saturday Night Live, I am looking forward to that episode, and I go back and watch her performances, and they're always phenomenal.
I will say that she's on. I will vote for her eventually, eventually, because she is another talent that is, like you said, brings it all every time she's on.
It's something interesting too, not just a performance. It's a piece.
Yeah, the Flaming Lips. It was the duet that they did. So weird. Yeah.
She takes big swings, and that's what I want out of a musical guest.
Yeah, and she's a great artist. I didn't have her on my ballot, obviously, but I think she is definitely talented and someone that, you look forward to having her be the musical guest. You're in good hands when she's going to pop up.
I know a few of us have withheld votes. So has anybody made a decision on those held back votes? I think I've made a call. My one vote, I'm going to go to John Belushi. I think, Brad, you made a strong case. He's a keystone of the early years. Dave, who are you going to cut? Because you have a few too many.
Yeah, it's either Smigel, Carvey, Dave Grohl, or Miley Cyrus. I'm leaning towards Dave Grohl is getting cut. Probably Smigel because it's in his first ballot. But, Dana Carvey, I don't know.
So
did
anybody sway you, Brad?
I had Maya Rudolph on my bubble, wanting to kind of be pushed to, get pushed to put her in. She might make it. I think Mike O'Donoghue might get pulled out of my bubble after talking. So, I may not even use all 15. And I had two people kind of at the top of my bubble weren't brought up. Buck Henry was somebody at like the top of my bubble, like not making list, that I was kind of hoping somebody might bring up. So, but yeah, that's kind of where I ended.
Anything change for you? Any epiphanies?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that when I was going through on the first run, really go with my gut in terms of, who do I feel just as outright, should I want to get in right away? But also with the chance to still have people get in. I think there's some people that were on my bubble that are more recent that kind of got bumped out as we were talking here today too. And so I think with some of my remaining votes, Dick Ebersol, Herb Sargent, and Bill Murray were right there. I think in terms of being able to get in terms of, like I said, just contributions to the show and some people that I think it's hard to tell the story of the show without. And I think they deserve to get in a little sooner than some people that have had some recent successes. So I guess, Brad, the recency bias, I got to put that aside. So I learned something today. So it's good. I'm glad I came to the round table.
Woo!
Awesome.
I think I've come to a decision. I'm going to vote for Miley Cyrus. I talked myself into it. I'm going to cut Dave Grohl.
All of a sudden.
And so my last slot is either Smigel or Carvey. And, at me, everybody. Let me know what you think.
That's a hard choice. That is a hard choice. I do not envy that. But, well, guys, thank you so much today. Where can people find you, Brad?
You can find me on the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. We're a relatively new podcast diving into the first 5 years of SNL. We have new episodes every Tuesday. And we're social media is Not For PD Pod.
Awesome. And Dave?
You can find me at Dave Buckman at most social medias, or check out Cold Town Theater, COLDTOWNE Theater in Austin, Texas. We also host Austin Sketchfest, June 22nd through the 25th this year at Cold Town Theater in Austin, Texas, with troops from New York, Chicago, and LA, as well as Austin, Texas.
And Will?
Cool. You can find me popping up randomly on SNL podcasts. And I would say also on socials at W Norman with a 0. But yeah, just that's all I got on my end.
Right. And I'm Matt Ardill, your trivia meister. And you can also find me on the podcast Order Up, talking about food with a variety of comedians and Gelman from Regis and Kathy Lee, oddly enough. I don't know how we had that get, but we got that get, and I'm not going to complain about it. But thanks, everybody, for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. follow us on social media at SNL HOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.